Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to study a little bit of Ki-Tisa. It's, of course, very exciting in the midst of these very technical parshas. We have a parsha with kind of a lot of action in it, so to speak, because we have the Eggless Off. Now, while I'll touch a little bit on the golden calf, we could spend months and months on the golden calf, as many of the Mefarshim do. But I want to just touch on one note before that, and then I'll do a little bit about the golden calf. Just before that, I wanted to let you know of something new that if you're on our email list, I don't know if you are, but if you're on our email list, you just got something in your email now, something I just started today on Purim Katan. Today's Purim Katan. So that means not 1 month till Purim, that means 2 months till Pesach. That's what it means. So if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. I'm entering into the 2022. So I started a podcast because, if you don't have a podcast, who are you, right? So I started a podcast, but it was actually based on certain events that took place. And let me explain. So there's one of the great rabbis in the Dati Leumi community in Israel. His name is Rav Malamad. You may or may not have heard of him. He authored a series of halachic svarim, which are, I think they've sold already over 1 million copies. It's known as Penine Halacha. Penine Halacha, which is ubiquitous in Israel. It's in every bookstore, everywhere. It's in every army base. Some people have called it the Mishnah Brura of our generation, which is quite a thing. Now, this summer, my wife and I, we were in Israel, and I traveled to Har Bracha. I remember when we did the shiur on Har Grizim and Har Eval. So Har Grizim is Har Bracha, and Har Bracha, there's a yeshiva there, but the Rav of the community and the head of the yeshiva is Rav Malamad. And Rav Malamad is considered, again, in that Zionist religious community as one of the preeminent poskim and leaders. But like any decent person these days, he got canceled. Not by the Haredi community and not by his own people, meaning by certain members within the Dati Leumi community. And the email I sent out, the only English article I could really find about it, which comes from a very yeshivish website, which is not the greatest thing in the world, much better in the Hebrew news. But the reason why he got canceled is that, first of all, he had the chutzpah. Could you imagine the chutzpah, the gall that he met with leaders of the reform movement, and he was trying to bridge gaps, and he was trying to find ways that we could have areas of commonality and to bring people closer. And he was criticized for that. And then once that took place, then they said, oh, and by the way, his Torah is no good either. They didn't like this about his farm and that about his farm. So this happened a couple of months ago, and then it became very, very public in the newspapers, and they had these letters that were sent to all the shuls saying that you can't have his farm. So you can imagine what it's like in Israel, especially in a relatively small. Israel's like one big shul. So I was in touch with the Rav back in November to give chizuk, and he was very appreciative. I had a great time spending with him, and like really a tzaddik, really an absolutely brilliant person. And the brilliance of his farm is that everything is just laid out beautifully and clearly. And then when this came out in the paper, I reached again, and his response was not, oh, we're going to go to the papers and tell everybody how they're wrong. He says his response was, let's get as many people as possible to learn Penine Halacha, to learn Torah. So what a great response. That's a great thing, right? Somebody starts to smear you, let's learn Torah. So I've been thinking about what to do. So I finally, I sat down and did it. So we're going to, and I've already released the first episode today, is that we're just going to teach Penine Halacha. I'm going to teach this forum. We have these little mini shiurim. So while you're driving to work or walking around the block, or if you're, she's not here, but she's, cooking soup in the kitchen, while you have that, you can listen to it. So you can get it. Just look up Penine Halacha. It's on Spotify. It's on Amazon Music. It's going to be on Apple Music soon, hopefully. It's, it's like, I feel like such a monoprice, but it's a lot that goes into it, by the way. The recording of it, the equipment that you need, you can't just, record, and the editing is a big part of it. It's a good start. And I hope to, it's certainly during the weekdays to do as much as I can. But it's as I said in the thing, it's lahagdil Torah lahadir. We want to spread Torah, but it's also, so we're starting now. I started Dafka today because it's Shloshim Yom Kar Machad. So we start with the laws of Purim. So each episode is less than 12 minutes or something like that. So to have a 12-minute, 10-minute, 8-minute snippet about halachas of Purim, I think would be extremely helpful and I hope beneficial to those who listen. So that was just released today. So if you're not, you know what, I'll send a link. I'll forward the email to our Shiur list as well afterwards, so you can all get a copy of that. Anyway, let's now go.
Malamad is Sephardic for sure.
No, he's not.
He's not.
So what's interesting is Aline asked if Rav Malamad is Sephardic. He's not Sephardic. If matter of fact, if you would look at him, and it's a thing I never understood it until a few years ago when I saw it, and I still don't understand it. But the Rosh Yeshiva in, let's say, Merkaz Harav, when I was there for Yom Yerushalayim or Yom Ha'atzmaut for their davening, they dressed like Litvisher Rosh Yeshivas, like a black hat and a long black coat. It's the wildest thing. I don't understand that, but that's just kind of like the beged. It's the malbush of the Rosh Yeshiva. But no, completely Israeli. His father is a well-known figure for Arutz Sheva for many years, I believe. But he's. I asked him. I think he's 60 years old. 60 years old, and I'm telling you, his books have sold over 1 million copies. And the website, which is linked to the podcast, also has translations of the text, which is just excellent. So I think if you want sort of like straightforward, clear, concise descriptions of halacha, and he covers all areas of halacha. So we're just doing Purim, but he has on all areas of halacha. This is the way to go, and it's really outstanding. So I'm just trying to do my part, and I asked the Rav permission, and he was thrilled. He was actually like, they were very encouraging for me to do this. So I'm just trying to do my part the best that I can. But again, we want to be able to teach and spread Torah, so we could get Torah anywhere. So while you're taking a 15-minute walk or you're just driving somewhere, it's certainly easy to listen to. So let's get to the matter at hand, and that is our shiur this morning. And Ki-Tisa, first of all, has the longest. Anybody ever had a bar mitzvah, grandson bar mitzvah? This parsha, it's brutal because the first two aliyahs, which cover the first part and then the Chet HaEgel, is almost 100 psukim. Imagine a 1-2 punch of 100 psukim. That's more than some total parshas. And the reason why it's designed like that, because some of the later aliyahs are actually very, very short. But we want to make sure that the second aliyah, a Levi, has the story of the golden calf, because Levi was not involved in the sin of the golden calf. So it's but it's neat how these things work out, how we want to make sure that even those who were not involved, they certainly are the ones who should be receiving that aliyah. By the way, that's the sole reason why the rabbi usually gets the aliyah for Aseres HaDibros, for the 10 Commandments, because they feel like, oh, he's the one that can live up to it. I always give it away. I don't want it. Not that I don't want it, but I'm not so into aliyahs. It's not worse to pick who gets it. That's why you have an assistant rabbi. I am not. Some people are very makpid on getting aliyahs. I am not one of those people. I always joke we have Mr. Eckstein, who he should live and be well. He's a Holocaust survivor, a Cohen here. And during the week, we often don't have a Levi. So last week, for instance, when we had Monday laning, Tuesday, Wednesday, Rosh Chodesh, Thursday laning, and when there's no Levi, what happens is the Cohen gets 2 aliyahs. They call him Cohen, and then they call him Bimkom Levi. So I think I got 8 aliyahs in a row in 1 week. And Hanukkah, they really clean up. And I said, you get more aliyahs in a week than I get in a whole year, which is true. But that's what it is. So that's why the Levi gets that aliyah. So before we even get to the Chet HaEgel, and we finish some areas of the Mishkan, we always have a mention of Shabbos. So if you're in the Stone Chumash, look at page 490. It's chapter 31, verse 12, Lamed Aleph Yud Beis. And I want to show you something really interesting from the Brisker Rav. But let's look at the Psukim first, and then I will go to the sources and I will put it up on the screen. So, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor, v'ato daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, ach es shabbososai tishmoru, ki osi beini uveinechem l'dorosechem ladas ki ani Hashem mekadishchem. Hashem says to Moshe, speak to the children of Israel, you must observe my Sabbaths, Shabsosai, Sabbaths, plural. It's a sign between me and you for generations to know that I am Hashem who makes you holy. And Ushmartem es Shabbos, you have to observe the Shabbos, 6 days you work, etc., etc. And V'shomer b'nei Yisrael Shabbos, this we know because we say it in Kiddush every week, and it ends Vayi Nafash, and then we go straight into the story of the golden calf. So I will now, let me put this up on the screen, and let's look at something really interesting here. Okay, you see it? Thumbs up? Got it, okay, good. So I'm actually gonna go to the second page first. Okay, here we go. Let me blow it up. Now, this first piece comes from the...
Is there any way to make it a little bit larger?
Yeah, let's see what I could do.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Thank you very much.
You must have a lousy eye doctor. No, she's the best eye doctor in the world. Although, as ironically, like the second I hit 50, it's like I can't see anything, and I'm like, I'm taking glasses on and off, and this. I have a glass for this, a glasses for that, a glass for this computer for that. And by the way, spending so much time in front of a screen the last 2 years has not helped. Dry eyes and things like that. Anyway, I digress yet again. Ach et shabsosai tishmaru ki osi. This is from the Brisker Rav, the Griz al HaTorah. So, yesh lomar, tehine b'Shabbos ika shnei devarim. When it comes to Shabbos, there are two things. Chada, the hizecher letzias mitzrayim, shehi yisod lebechiras ukedushas Yisrael, k'dechsiv asher otzesi eschem me'eretz mitzrayim liyos lachem legomer. So first of all, we always say zecher letzias mitzrayim. Everything we talk about on Shabbos is to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt, because God took us out, and that shows that we are the chosen nation. It's 2 months from now, we're going to be sitting at the Seder tonight, talking about the chosenness of us. God took us out of Egypt. We have to be a holy nation. God is holy. We have to be holy. And in many places. Also, we say that Shabbos is an os. Shabbos is an, or you might say ot. Shabbos is a sign that what? That we know that God is our God and God sanctifies us. We are sanctified because of God. So that's number one. That Shabbos is Zecher Letzias Mitzrayim. V'shenis, the second aspect of Shabbos is Zikaron L'Maaseh Bereshis. If you notice, sometimes in Kiddush we say Zikaron L'Maaseh Bereshis, Yom Techila L'Mikra Kodesh, Zecher Letzias Mitzrayim. So you have both right there. Commemoration of creation, commemoration of the Exodus. Right? So if you look in our text here, first we have, remember the Shabbos. It's a sign that I am the God who takes you out, meaning I'm the guy that sanctifies you, and that's referring to the Exodus. And then it says 6 days you should work, and the seventh day you rest. And the Shomer Israel, why? Because God is the God of creation, and God rested on the seventh day. Okay? And he says, when we talk about remembering the Exodus, that is not necessarily limited only to Shabbos observance, but even to all of the holidays. Every single holiday, if you think about it, when we say Kiddush, and we always mention Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim and all of the davening and all of the benching and all of the Kiddush, because even the holidays are very much connected to Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. It's an interesting question. I'll leave it as an open question, and if you could find an answer, I'll give you bonus points on the final. And that is that even Rosh Hashanah is mentioned as Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim in the Chumash. What on earth does Rosh Hashanah? I mean, in our liturgy, what on earth does Rosh Hashanah have to do with the Exodus? Okay, so think about that. Do some research. Consult with the Google Rebbe, as we call him, and see what you come up with. Anyway, Ve'hein Atzman Os. So if Yontif is connected to Exodus, and they are themselves an Os, Mishum Hachi Ptiri Kulu Mitefillin, And what this means, there's a halachic answer. The question is, if I ask you, why don't you wear tefillin on Shabbos? Okay, in halacha, we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, we don't wear tefillin on Yom Tov, and it's not probably what you think. We'd think, oh, tefillin are muktzah. Well, why? Okay, so then why are tefillin muktzah? Muktzah is a generic term that we use for anything that we can't use or touch, even though that's misnomer. Muktzah can be touched, it cannot be moved. Our kids grow up in a world of, it's a muktzah toy. No, you can't, my favorite is, you can't do muktzah on Shabbos. First of all, you can't do muktzah ever, because that's grammatically incorrect. You cannot move a muktzah item on Shabbos, or you cannot use a muktzah item on Shabbos. But what is muktzah about tefillin? Because we say that Shabbos is an os, is a sign. Tefillin is a sign, as we read in chapter 12 of Exodus, and we don't want to have conflicting signs. In other words, one sign doesn't have to outdo the other, so therefore we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. And he says the same thing applies to Yom Tov as well. And that's what it means that they're all signed. Because that's why it says in the beginning, why does it say, my Shabbos plural, my Sabbaths plural in verse 2. I'm sorry, 13. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Pasuk Yud Gimel says Shabbos Osai in the plural. Why plural? Because it's not just Shabbos, it's also Shabbos and Yontif. Kimavur bepirish Rashi Shavuos. Aval b'ha'os hasheni shehu zikaron l'maseh bereshis. But when it says in the end of this paragraph, and it says V'shomer b'nei Yisrael es hashabbos, and it says it in the singular. Therefore, it says Ksiv es hashabbos singular dehu rak b'Shabbos bereshis bilvad, because that only applies. The commemoration of creation has nothing to do with Yontif. That only has to do with Shabbos and the original Shabbos. Therefore, it's written in the singular. Okay, very interesting point of the Brisker Rav. But let's look here in the bottom, in the Ksava Kabbalah. Ksava Kabbalah, and here he gives an unbelievable musar, something that we have to think about every single week on a regular Shabbos, because you and I well know that Shabbos at certain points becomes very rote for us, kind of going through the motions at times. And depending on what has happened during the week, or what we have coming ahead during the week, or who's with us, who's not with us, kind of have different maybe attitudes or dispositions when it comes to how we treat the Shabbos, or maybe how the Shabbos treats us. It's different for everybody, but I think we can all relate. So look at the Ksava Kabbalah writes. Shabbosai tishmaru, ba lashon yachid al rabim. He says he's also commenting why the plural Sabbaths. Why does it change a yachid to a singular to a plural? Kitam Shabbosai, ba'avur ki Shabbos hashana heim rabim. So he quotes the Ramban, and the Ramban Nachmanides says that, simply speaking, if I would ask you, why does it say Shabbosai? Because it's not referring to keeping one Shabbos. You have to keep all of them. There are many of them. Lefi ha'mevuar, b'shem Shabbos sheyesh pei shnayim b'harasa. He says there's actually, when it comes to Shabbos, there are two facets, two sides of it. Ha'echad inyan habitul va'hefsek mimalacha. The first is just refraining from any sort of work. When I say work, it's a misnomer, because the word malacha does not mean work. The word for work is avodah. Malacha is creative activities which are defined by the building of the Mishkan, which is why, by the way, it appears here in the middle of the building of the Mishkan. That's the beginning of Parshas Vayakel, which we're going to have next week, is where we actually derive the 39 malachas. So the 39 categories of creative activity that show our mastery over the universe. And that is based on the translation and the definition of Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. If you want a keen understanding of what this means, I would recommend there's a small, great book called The Sabbath, written by Dr. I. Grunfeld. Diane Grunfeld is the ultimate Hirschian. He translated much of the works of Rav Hirsch from the German, but he wrote a book on the Sabbath, and there he very clearly explains the nature of why the malachas are chosen. So just to give you an example, if I can make it in a way that we can understand, is when you say, what can't you do on Shabbos? People say work. So wait a minute. Technically speaking, I could move all the furniture in my house, upstairs, downstairs. I can move couches from here to there, and I can have a tremendous amount of exertion, and that's technically fine on Shabbos, but I cannot take a pen and write two letters, which is virtually no exertion. So it has nothing to do with work or exertion, but it has to do with what falls into those categories. Okay, so that's what Shabbos is. So he says the first is that we have to refrain, bitul hefsek mimalacha, refrain and stop from these categories of what are known as melacha, as creative activities. V'hasheni, inyan yishiv hadas inyanim elokiyim. And he says the second is that we have to sort of focus our minds and reconcile to godly and have godly thoughts, or godly, be in a godly state. Now here, he wrote in the original, I think it was German, Basinengustustug. Okay, I don't know what that means. Everybody knows Germany, can tell me. The Ksava Kabbalah was Rav Tzvi Mecklenburg. He was a Rav in Germany, so that's how often in his writings he puts in a German word. Imkain. Yesh bekol Shabbos v'Shabbos shtei shavisos. He says, and if that's the case, then each and every Shabbos, there are two restings, so to speak, or two refrainings. Shvisas haguf miskei olam. We rest our physical bodies from that which is going on in the world. Ushvisas v'yishuv hanefesh v'hisasek be'inyanim ruchanim elokiyim. And then we have to sort of rest our souls, our minds, so that we can involve ourselves in matters of the spirit of godliness. Ve'ein shvisas haguf levada iker v'tachlis kiyum asay de shvisas Shabbos, and just not doing malacha, refraining from the physical things, or the everyday, so to speak. That's not the only fulfillment of keeping Shabbos. Ki omnam enu rak siba goremes al shvisas v'yishuv das hanefesh. Those are just a way. Those are a preparatory step to get us to the real fulfillment, which is to focus our souls. He says that's the real purposeful observance of Shabbos, is to engage in these sort of spiritual endeavors. That's why it says in the plural, Shabbos, my Sabbaths you shall observe. Meaning that every Shabbos you have to have these two types of restings, these two types of Shabbos attitudes. First, shvisas haguf mimalachas mas. Of course, that which we don't do. We don't go to work. We don't do this. We don't do that. Shvisas hanefesh b'malachas avodas Hashem. But not only that, we have to rest our souls and give it the opportunity to serve God. And they have to be two sides of one coin, and they can't be separated. Because in fact, they are one matter. How do we get to be able to rest our souls so that we can engage in godly things? By refraining from all the earthly things, and that's how we do it. That's why the pasuk says, "Al shtehen shehen achas be'emes lashon yachad ki osi." It says, "Shmartem Shabbosai, my Shabbosos," but then later it turns it into one Shabbos in singular, because indeed those two are actually one. There's a famous Maimer Chazal. It says, I think it's in the Gemara, I'm not sure offhand, but that it says that would it be that the Jewish people would observe just two Shabboses, they would be redeemed forever. So we think, oh, that's great. Let's get everybody. We'll do like the Shabbat project, but we'll do it 2 weeks in a row. We'll do it Noach and then Lech Lecha, right? We'll get Rabbi Warren Goldstein and he'll speak twice. And it's a tremendous thing, by the way, the Shabbos project. Have you ever been a part of it? So we'll get everybody to keep two Shabboses. If we keep two Shabboses, so we have to change the lyrics of the song also. Because remember, the song used to be just one Shabbos and we'll all be free. You know the song? Mordechai and David? No? Anyone? Just one Shabbos and we'll all be free. Well, now we have to say to just two Shabboses and we'll all be redeemed. Okay? It's not talking about two different Shabboses in succession. Oh, you have to keep this Shabbos and you have to keep that Shabbos. Ki'im al shtei shavisos eila asher yislachadu ve'lo yisadu b'yom echad v'achas hine be'emes b'guf u'v'nefesh. He says not that you keep two successive Shabboses or two different Shabboses. Observe, it means keep both aspects of the Shabbos, which is shvisas haguf and shvisas hanefesh. And that's a very, very beautiful idea. leading into the story of the Egel, and then we'll see that's also very much connected to the Mishkan. Okay, fine. Let's go back to the text for a second. Let me full screen everybody. Okay, now we get into the Eggless Off, which you could read it 8 million times and still not really fully understand what's going on. And I want to just share with you a very sort of practical, almost paternal approach to this episode, which I always found very heartwarming. It's from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and the Emes Yaakov. So, but first, okay, the chapter ends before 32 that we have these two tablets that sets the stage, and they were written by the finger of God. Now, all of a sudden, so Moshe's up on the mountain. We had Shavuos. He says, okay, you want the Torah? I'm going to go get it. He's coming down. He's supposed to come down 40 days later. This is just about on the 17th of Tammuz. And we know what happens then. He's going to come down. He's going to smash the tablets in the 40 days, all the way to Yom Kippur. Fine. The people saw that Moshe has delayed in descending the mountain. Now, someone, and it could be something innocuous. Have you ever had a meeting and you're told to wait for somebody? Or if, let's say, pick me up in front of the store and you're in an illegal parking spot, which is sort of illegal because you're picking somebody up, you're waiting. But let's say it's longer than you expect to have to wait. And there's people behind you, and there's people want to get in, people want to get out, and you just start feeling very antsy, very uncomfortable. Like, I got to get you. I got to go. I got to get, people are hungry. I'm waiting for somebody. Wait 1 second. What? Wait, right? It's a very uncomfortable situation. So you can imagine when you're supposed to meet someone, especially someone who is very much a leader or a father figure. And I've always given the analogy of a kid, let's say in a big store, and they lose a parent and they could panic. Usually it's the other way around. The parent loses the kid in the big store and we panic. So that's happened to all of us, right? Come on. I told you, I must have told you the story. My Adina, oh, my sweet Adina, she's just had her bat mitzvah. She once years ago, we lost her in downtown Disney, which is now called Disney Springs. They changed the name of it, but downtown Disney, they have that like obscene huge store that they could just, sell you more and more Disney stuff that you don't need. I mean, if you like that sort of thing. And there's like 96 doors, and she was in the stroller, and next thing we know, she's not in the stroller. So I remember my wife, she just dropped down on the floor and started crying. And I'm thinking, like, I don't think we're gonna find her that way. And we spread out, but it's a horrible, horrible feeling and a panic. God forbid. And she ran off, whatever. She was 2. So that's what kids do. With my son now, he's never where he's supposed to be. I mean, that's just it's come to a point now, by the way, if something goes wrong in the shul, the first question is like, where's Moshe? That's just kind of like how it goes now. Like, and I'm very honest about it. Okay. And he's very honest when I confront him. Anyway, so Moshe's delaying, and what happens? Turn to page 494. Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. Vayikahel doesn't mean, and they sent the delegation and they asked, by the way, any idea when Moshe's coming? Now, maybe they jumped the gun, or maybe they had been asking, I don't know. But Vayikahel is they en masse gathered al Aharon. It's not like they sent a few people el Aharon to Aharon to ask him. It's Vayikahel al Aharon. They gathered on Aharon and they said, they didn't ask, like, where's Moshe? They just said, Vayomaru elav, kum asay lanu Elohim, asher yelchu lefanenu, ki zeh Moshe ha'ish, asher ha'elonu meretz yitzram liyadanu mehayalo. They said, get up, make us Elohim, make us a god or a leader or something who asher yelchu lefanenu, that will walk in front of us. Ki zeh Moshe ha'ish, because this guy Moshe, or this Moshe ha'ish, maybe he's human, we need somebody who's not human because humans have mistakes, I don't know, that took us up from Me'eretz Mitzrayim, from Egypt, lo yadanu mehel, we have no idea what happened to him. Now, it doesn't take a lot of skill to read into this verse to say, well, they have a lot of issues, okay? First of all, they're saying that, who took you out of Egypt? Right? God took us out of Egypt. They're saying, Moshe took us out of Egypt. So they have this tremendous amount of dependency on Moshe Rabbeinu as a figure, Moshe Rabbeinu as Ha'ish, and we don't know what happened to him. So if he's out of the picture, what do we need? We need, I'm using the Ramban's interpretation of this, is they don't need another God. We need another Moshe. Now, however they viewed Moshe, maybe they viewed him as a sort of deity. Maybe they said, because they called Elohim to replace Moshe. Wait, what about real Elohim? What about God? Maybe they felt too disconnected. Maybe they felt that Moshe had to be the go-between and they need someone to do so. Now, I don't want to get into Aaron's reply. I don't want to get into his behavior here. That's a whole other shiur for a whole other time. And it's definitely worth investigating. But again, I don't want to conflate the two ideas. But just simply the question of what were they thinking? What on earth were they thinking? And by the way, this will very much answer one of those, we talk about these sort of looming questions or these big questions, is that the punishment for the sin of the golden calf was not as severe as the punishment for the sin of the spies. And you might think that this is far more egregious. This is the same nation that a few days ago, they just heard, I am the Lord your God, thou shalt not have any other gods, don't make yourselves a graven image, and next thing I know, they're making a golden calf. Like, I mean, how messed up can you be? How much trouble can you get into so quickly? Yet, send some spies. I don't believe the spies. I don't want to go into it. So, and that they get, you're all going to die. You're not going into Israel. And here, okay, you're going to get a slap on the wrist, as it were, or whatever, however you want to call it, whatever the punishment might be. But it's not one of death, and there was no decree that they couldn't go into the land of Israel. As of right now, after this, they're going in. It's no problem. All right, we'll get over it. We had trouble in the first year of marriage. We went to some counseling. We worked it out. It's all good. So this will help us understand, because this is not necessarily it's a crime of just sort of desperation. And sometimes when people are desperate, they don't necessarily think clearly. So I want to show you this piece from Yaakov Kamenetsky, which I think is absolutely remarkable, just because the way he puts it for us is really something really incredible. Okay, you see it now? Okay, here. Emes Yaakov. L'chaora, you have, okay. Harei ze davar matmia. Sheze lo mikfar amdu v'amru kulom yachtav kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma v'tekef omrim kum aseh lanu elokim. He says, how is it possible that the nation that just said na'aseh v'nishma, chapter 24, verse 7, that's how you remember it, 24/7, that in 24/7 they said na'aseh v'nishma, the words that carry us as a Jewish people, and a second later, they're saying, oh yeah, make us another God. He says, how is it possible? It boggles the mind. Ukfar biru hakadmonim ki kavanasam haisa liyitzur manhig umashpia. So like I mentioned the Rambans, he says, and he quotes the Kadmonim. Now, by the way, there are many, many, many different interpretations of what took place at the golden calf, what went wrong, what was the real sin. And generally speaking, the more explanations that we have on something, which means the less that we understand what really happened. But the Ramban, he says that Kavanasam, their intent was, they wanted a creation of Manhegu Mashpia. They wanted a new leader. They wanted someone who's going to guide them and influence them. And he says that's what the Ramban writes. He says, but still, it's very, very problematic. Even if you say that, it doesn't make it okay. Who panics like that in 1 second? If God has just given you everything right in front of your eyes, how is it a second later? So a while back, if we looked back in Parashas Beshalach, this is a fascinating insight in Parashas Beshalach. I'm not sure if I shared it here a few weeks ago. We did in Shul, but there are exactly in Parashas Beshalach there are 116 verses. Exactly half of those verses, 58 of those verses, are leaving Egypt, splitting the sea. The second 58 verses automatically starts with, okay, they cross over. There's nothing to drink. What are we going to drink? The water's bitter. We're complaining. All negative things, exactly halfway. How is it possible that a nation that has witnessed the destruction of their enemies, who have tormented them for hundreds of years, and God splits the sea in natural miracles and supernatural miracles, how is it that the next day they're complaining we have nothing to drink? No, the answer is that life is like that. Is that you could have seen it.
If you think about it, right, they were slaves for so long, their psyche was so beaten down. You have no rights. You're not a human being. You're dehumanized. You're just working with no pay, no nothing. And now all of a sudden you're free. I think it's a hard mental adjustment. And think about when a survivor came out. You can't just assume normal behavior after all those years, which is maybe why the younger people ended up being allowed in and weren't participating, because they didn't have the same exposure to that dehumanization.
Correct. As the saying goes, is you could take the people out of slavery, but you couldn't take the slavery out of the people, which, by
Right.
the way, there have been studies and books written about how that existed in our country. That, in the mid 1860s, when abolition took place, many slaves, without anywhere to go, any recourse, they actually just went back to where they had been working, which is amazing if you think about it. So here, but the idea that it's one thing to not have an identity or not know how to deal, but to be able to complain, God just gave you everything, because when your kid is hungry and has nothing to eat, I don't care what you did for me yesterday, the day before, I need something to eat. And I don't care what great miracles you did to me last week. Right now, we have nothing to eat, and that's human nature. So the question here of sort of, how do they turn so quickly? Now, we're not talking about food and drink. We're talking about, all right, Moshe, so wait a second. He's coming down in 5 hours. Like, who goes from like 0 to 60 like that? So look what Rabbi Yaakov writes. He says, first of all, how could we possibly go into their shoes? We can't go into their matzav. We can't go into their situation. He says, so check it out for yourself. Gadol ben shishim ribu anashim, ben chaf ad ben samach. You have a nation that has 600,000 people between 20 and 60. Vod harbe ribo shel noshim zakenim v'taf. Machana shel 3 million bnei adam. You have a camp of 3 million people. And we've discussed here in this forum how many is the greatest number of people you've been at. I think the number came up maybe 500,000-600,000 people. So we don't even know what this is like to have 3 million people. The chulam omdim below shum mishan lechem amayim ba'midbar v'tzimon asher ayu b'mayim. They're in the desert. They have no way of providing for themselves water, bread, sustenance. Halo Omar Chazal, he quotes the Gemara in Eruvin, dikduke anios ma'avirin asa adam al da'at v'aldas kono. When a person is needy, when a person is wanting, he says that you can't act rationally, and things that people will do will defy nature. For kolshkein b'tanaim elu, halo matzav ayom hinu. He says they're in a horrible, awful situation, a weighty situation. Madua nifla zos be'einenu shelo amda be'nisayin shekazeh. He says, how can we even question their motives? He says, they all know. Why did the man come? The only way they were able to sustain themselves is via the man for food. And why did the man come? It became because of Moshe. No Moshe, no man. So when there's no sustenance, then people, again, they start to act cuckoo. And when the Satan, and Rashi brings it out that there's the Satan playing tricks, and he shows an image that Moshe is not coming back. So if you even inject in their minds, even though it's fake news, but even if they enters into their minds that Moshe is not coming back, wait a minute. So they didn't care so much about Moshe. What do they care about Moshe? They just care about themselves because they're in the middle of nowhere. And like you said, they were slaves and everything was given to them. Even as a slave, everything was given to you. But here they're on their own. We have no way to possibly get food for ourselves. No Moshe, what's going to happen? No Moshe, no man. Who knows if there's going to be anything? He says, "Ain't shum." Top of the column now. Shiuri pas kulo. There's no bread. What are we supposed to do? It's not like there's a makolet nearby that could feed 3 million. Not even a Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club. None of these things, which are just gigantic. He says, and therefore, when somebody enters into this state, you can't think clearly. You're not going to be rational. You're not going to be normal. And all these kids are going to be asking, what are we going to eat? What can we eat? Where's it to eat? And you have nothing to tell them. What are you going to say to them? Oh, he'll be here tomorrow. What tomorrow? We have to eat today. I can't wait. Therefore, they felt that their only recourse was no Moshe, no Mon. We need a new Moshe. We have to fill his place. So when Chur, who was a casualty of this whole mess, he was either the husband of Miriam or some say others, but if he was the husband of Miriam and he stood up and he said, wait, just have patience, which is a rational response because he's coming, maybe he has some inside information, but they don't want to hear that. What do? They kill them. Mob mentality takes over. And Aaron, as a delay, as a stall tactic, what does he do? He says, take off your jewelry, right? What do? Do they start? They don't care. What do I need jewelry for? What do I need gold and silver? I want to eat. So of course they took it off right away. Because everybody will give anything so that they can survive. They realize what's really important. That it comes that the fault here in the people in the sin of the Egel was that there was a lack of bitachon, a lack of faith. But the word there are different words for faith. There's a word for faith is emunah. The word bitachon is also related to the word security. Right? In Israel, when you talk about security services, you use the word bitachon. You're walking around, it says bor bitachon, a safe pit, or this. So bitachon is a level of faith in God that you're secure, that you know whatever you need is coming to you, and that you'll get what you need. Here, they didn't have that. V'navin b'zeh divrei hanavi Yecheskel, and quotes the Navi Yecheskel, Ezekiel, Shamar, v'yamru bi Beis Yisrael b'midbar, v'shab sosai chilu me'od, v'amar lishbo chamasi aleihem b'mber l'chalosam, v'esel l'man shemi levilti echel le'nei goyim asher tzeisim le'neihem. What does the pasuk says? He says that they rebelled against me, and they violated my Sabbaths, etc. And I wanted to pour out my anger upon them. What does it mean that? Why is he mentioning that? I understand they rebelled, but what does it talk about that they desecrated the Shabbos? Where do we see that the nation as a whole violated the Shabbos? We only saw it with one case of the man or the makoshesh, one who gathered wood. The only time that God wanted to wipe out the people as a whole was twice. The one time was twice. How's that for a good sentence? The only times that were two times was first by the golden calf, and then again by the story of the Meraglim in Parsha Shlach. We never saw that there was a violation of the Sabbath that warranted this sort of response from God. He says, no. What I explained, he says, it makes a lot of sense. What's the hardest thing about Shabbos? The hardest thing about Shabbos is, wait a minute, if I work 6 days a week and I make X amount, then I should work 7 days a week and make X plus 1, right? They actually, my Rebbe always used to tell us the story years ago. There was always fights about whether El Al should fly on Shabbos, and they've had like different tekufos where they didn't. And the thinking is if we make 6 days worth of revenue, why not make 7 days worth of revenue? And when they finally agreed to stop flying on Shabbos, the revenue actually went up for the company. So Shabbos is about a bitachon that I can take leave of the material things in the world, and I'll be fine. That's a level of faith. And you say, I have the security that God will provide what I need by actually refraining from being involved in things. For some people, it's very easy. For some people, it's very, very, very hard. Look at anybody who, these young attorneys, for instance, right? Or even older attorneys. It doesn't end. As somebody once said to me, it's like we have a guy in the shul, he works in a certain type of fund, and I go, what? He goes, do you have like slow seals? My work is like a baseball season that never ends. It never ends. And I know, like I have friends of mine, and whether you're a partner or a junior partner or not even on the partner track, like when it gets to like Shabbos afternoon, 2-3 hours before Shabbos is coming to a close, they start to panic because they're just dreading like opening up their computer or their phones and knowing the emails that they have to respond to. They're going to be working all Saturday night and all Sunday and this and that. But there's a certain level of bitachon. I always love telling the story of Herman Wouk. Herman Wouk, who just passed away. I thought, I didn't realize he was even still alive. He was like over 100 years old. My favorite book of all time. You'll ask anybody a trivia question about me, and if it's an imposter, ask them what the favorite book is, and if they give you a different answer, you'll know it's not me. Just putting that out there in case they ever get cloned and kidnapped. My favorite book of all time is The Cain Mutiny. Cain Mutiny, written by Herman Wouk. But Herman Wouk also wrote a book on Judaism. He became observant later in his life, and he wrote a book called This Is My God, based on Zek Keli Ve'anvehu. And it's like a primer, a beautiful. And if you ever have anybody that has questions about basic Judaism, wants to know, that's the book I would recommend. This Is My God. And he was once doing a major production, and it was supposed to open Saturday night, and then comes Friday afternoon, and he's leaving. They're like, well, where are you going? He's like, it's Shabbos. I'm leaving. And like, but you can. We're opening it. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And he left, and he came back Saturday night in time for the opening. And when he walked in, they stopped everything and they applauded. They couldn't believe that someone who was putting on this show would walk away and come back. But that's bitachon. He says that's what it is. When they high timer, b'Shabbos Rishona k'shahiyu b'mara herel Hashem yisbarach she'alidei eitz mar nefach ma'mayim l'sukim. The first Shabbos, right after the Exodus, and they come to Mara, and they have no water, and the water is bitter. How does he make the water sweet? He throws something bitter into the water, and that makes it sweet. That's why he says to the people with the man, eat it today. You eat the man today because you show that, you know what, my heart is secure, knows that God runs the world. He says, and this is what and he goes on and on about this, but the point is that when it came to the sin of the golden calf, is that they didn't have that security knowing that God will perform with them. Now, take into account that what Rav Yaakov says in the beginning is we can't necessarily fault them for that, because I think it's very important for us. It's very easy for us to stand here and read the text and say, oh, if you would have been there, would you have been any different? Right? Have you ever really had to sacrifice bitachon for Shabbos or anything like that? There are times, by the way, when we are put in situations where our faith is put on the line, or our commitment to certain ideals or traditions, or we'll have sort of our red lines in halacha, things we're willing to do and not to do. And by the way, it's different for everybody, but we can't put ourselves in someone else's position. Okay, I have a great my great bit on this. There's some things that people will never do. Like I'll never eat pork, right? Don't tell anybody that non-kosher is not kosher. Okay, fine. But my favorite one of all time, and this is just having done this for now a quarter of a century and done many, many, many funerals, is that you could eat chazer treif on Yom Kippur in your car, but don't you dare ever hand a shovel to somebody at a cemetery. That's like the worst thing you could ever do. Is like, you ever see that? Like, somebody hand, no, don't hand the shovel. Like, God, like, it's a custom. It's but it's the mentality of a Jew. But when it comes to certain things, when it comes to bitachon, when it comes to faith, that's what Rabbi Yaakov says. But he starts off, and I think that's the more important part of this piece, is where he says, don't judge so quickly. You have no idea what it's like to be in their shoes and to be wanting and completely dependent on another entity. And when that entity is gone, you have no idea what desperation will bring about, right? So we see two things here about the essence of Shabbos Sosai, that there are two elements of Shabbos, maybe two elements. Rabbi Yaakov, the Ksava Kabbalah says, Mecklenburg, that two things are really two of the one coin, two sides of the same coin, and that's what it means to keep two Shabboses, Shabbos Sosai, two aspects of the Shabbos, the physical and the spiritual, but also Shabbos is about bitachon. And when it comes to the Chet HaEgel, the sin was bitachon. They didn't have, and by the way, we can't even put ourselves in that matzah. We can't question it because we wouldn't know how we would be in that situation, and we shouldn't know from it either. I'm going to just stop the recording.